The Republican candidates last night waging a fierce exchange about Israel in the debate. Donald Trump said that he would back Israel, but that he also believed in talking to their neighbors, as he put it. Here's some of that.
It's probably the toughest negotiation anywhere in the world of any kind, okay? But it doesn't help if I start saying, I am very pro-Israel, very pro, more than anybody on this stage. But it doesn't do any good to start demeaning the neighbors, because I would love to do something with regard to negotiating peace, finally, for Israel and for their neighbors.
This is another area on which Donald agrees with Hillary Clinton and on which I disagree with them both strongly. Both Donald and Hillary Clinton want to be neutral, to use Donald's word, between Israel and the Palestinians. Let me be clear. If I'm president, America will stand unapologetically with the nation of Israel.
The next president of the United States needs to be someone like me who will stand firmly on the side of Israel. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I'm not either side. I will be on his side. I will be on Israel's side every single day, because they are the only pro-American, free enterprise democracy in the entire Middle East.
I'm a negotiator. I've done very well over the years through negotiation. It's very important that we do that. In all fairness, Marco is not a negotiator. I watched him melt down, and I'll tell you, it was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. He's not going down.
He thinks the Palestinian is a real estate deal.
And these people may even be tougher than Chris Christie, okay?
The Palestinians are not a real estate deal, Donald.
Okay, no. A deal,
They're not a real estate deal.
Is a deal. Let me tell you,
I've learned a long time ago. A deal is not a deal when you're dealing with terrorists. Have you ever negotiated with terrorists?
You are not a negotiator. You are not a negotiator.
KT McFarland, Fox News national security analyst and a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration. So, KT, have at it. What'd you make of all that?
What a snake pit. I mean, you know, look, I fault the moderator. I fault CNN. They didn't really care what the candidates were going to say. They just wanted to fight, and they were going to throw whatever else they could out there and gotcha questions, and they did get a fight. And it doesn't really solve anything. Everybody looks bad in that situation. There's no real difference between these three candidates. They're all pro-Israel. They all believe in guaranteeing the right of Israel to survive and to thrive in the heart of the Middle East. There's a slight difference when thrown out, would you negotiate? Well, Trump said, yeah, I'd negotiate, but I believe in Israel and I'd support Israel. The other two said, nah, probably wouldn't negotiate because the negotiations would be hopeless. The other guys wouldn't abide by them even if you had them. Well, Martha, I'm quoting the Israeli Prime Minister. He even said he'd negotiate. And he's no dove, he's no shrinking violet, he's one of the most hawkish leaders Israel's had in a generation. And even he has said, yeah, I'd negotiate, but I want to do it from strength.
Yeah. You know, when you think about where we are right now in our relationship with Israel and how tattered that situation has become between the United States and Israel. So whoever, you know, if a Republican is elected in this election, you know, perhaps Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz are saying we have to make very clear first where we stand. You know, before we start talking about negotiations, we need to make it clear to not only to Israel, but to the entire world, because, you know, a lot of people wonder where we stand right now in the Middle East.
Well, that's a really excellent point, because the United States, particularly under President Obama, Secretary Kerry, Secretary Clinton, we have never had relations that are this poor with Israel. And I go back a long time. I go back to the Nixon administration when we first started negotiating Arab-Israeli peace agreements, and the Reagan administration where we stood by Israel. There is a real question. President Obama has switched sides in the Middle East. We're no longer on the side of Israel. We're no longer on the side of our Sunni allies. He's switched over to the side of Iran. Iran supports the Palestinian activist groups. He supports the Iranians support terrorists in the region. So whoever is the next president needs to right up front say, Israel, I got your back and I mean it, and I'm going to guarantee Israel has never asked us for anything more than the equipment and the ability to defend themselves. And it's important for the next president to say it. And then you get to whatever negotiations you may or may not have.
Yeah. What did you think about the foreign policy discussion, or, you know, in some cases, lack thereof last night?
Yeah. Well, you know, Martha, I've watched the way you and Bill Hemmer have done negotiations, and in debates, and you've moderated the debates. And you've always managed to go after the substance. What is your position? How does your position disagree? How do you disagree with President Obama? And what we saw last night, it was just a food fight. It was just a bunch of boys of the fifth grade boys on the playground fighting with each other, egged on by the moderator. So I don't think it did anyone a service. And if you really want to see, we've seen a lot of these candidates, and we've seen good debates, and we've seen very poor debates. And I think for the most part, when they're poor debates, it's because the moderators themselves are doing something other than trying to get information for the American people. They're just trying to score points, get eyeballs, and create controversy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that we've heard, the question that I remember Mitt Romney answering, and we've talked about it so much since, in terms of who presents the greatest threat to the United States right now. I felt like there wasn't a lot of opportunity for them to really spell out what the United States' role is in the world right now and how they see it, which would have been interesting.
Well, it would have been fascinating because we've seen President Obama who said we're going to lead from behind. We know that there are crises in the Middle East, ISIS, the rise of Iran, Russia, resurgent Russia, China trying to claim part of the East China Sea as an internal Chinese lake, pipsqueak North Korea with nuclear weapons, and the refugee crisis in Europe. All of those are potentially the biggest crisis the United States faces, and I really would like to hear the candidates on those topics. How do they see the world? How do they see America's role in the world? It's maybe not the role of George Bush and the interventionism, but it's not Obama's role either. Where are they? And that's the one question we never heard last night or in most of the debates.
Well, often they use it to, I think Carson was asked about Kim Jong-un, and he sort of said, wait a minute, I didn't get to answer a question on this, or this, and he circled back around to use the opportunity to do that. So sometimes they just go the way they want to go anyway, quite often. KT, thank you. Always good to have you with us.
Thanks,
Martha. Have a good day.